What if everything you thought you knew about the justice system was wrong? In 2015, Netflix dropped a documentary that didn't just tell a story, it launched a movement. Making a Murderer transformed Steven Avery from a forgotten Wisconsin man into a national conversation starter. It questioned law enforcement, challenged our trust in the justice system, and sent shockwaves through households across the world. To understand the gravity of this story, we have to go back to 1985. Steven Avery was convicted of a brutal sexual assault he didn't commit. He spent 18 years behind bars before DNA evidence exonerated him in 2003. But just when freedom seemed certain, Avery was arrested again. This time for the 2005 murder of photographer Teresa Halbach. Making a Murderer explored this twist-filled saga, turning cold case files and courtroom testimonies into a binge-worthy documentary that played like a thriller. But this wasn't fiction. This was real life. And audiences were hooked. When Making a Murderer premiered, no one could have predicted its explosive impact. Within days, Twitter was ablaze with hashtags, #FreeStevenAvery, #JusticeForBrendan, and even #MakingAMurderer became a trending topic. Reddit forums dissected every frame. Facebook was flooded with armchair detectives, each convinced they'd found a new piece of evidence missed by investigators. Brendan Dassey, Avery's teenage nephew, emerged as a second tragic figure in the narrative. His confession, obtained under pressure, in a long and confusing interrogation without legal counsel, left viewers shocked. His vulnerability, captured in chilling footage, sparked a wave of empathy. Petitioners flooded the White House website with signatures demanding justice. Over 500,000 people signed for Brendan and Steven to be pardoned. It wasn't just the story itself that drew people in. It was how it was told. The documentary's slow reveals, haunting score, and raw interviews created an atmosphere of dread and disbelief. Viewers weren't just watching, they were feeling it. The cultural ripple spread fast. Podcasts broke down the episodes minute by minute. Journalists scrambled to fact-check claims. Even celebrities weighed in. Alec Baldwin, Kim Kardashian, and Ricky Gervais tweeted their outrage. The documentary had entered pop culture and ignited a firestorm. And if deep dive analysis like this hits your radar, take a second to hit like and drop a comment below. What was your first reaction to Making a Murderer? We want to know. As the documentary gained traction, a new battleground emerged: public opinion. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion on the case, from college students to seasoned legal analysts. The line between justice and entertainment blurred. One of the most visible outcomes was the petition for clemency. Over 500,000 signatures poured in, urging then-President Obama to issue a pardon. But there was a legal snag. Federal pardons only apply to federal crimes. Still, the sheer volume of support spoke volumes. Mainstream media, meanwhile, didn't quite know what to do. Some outlets treated Avery as a possible victim of institutional failure. Others doubled down on his guilt. In the age of digital opinion, facts became fluid, and biases, both old and new, shaped the narrative. This phenomenon brought one glaring issue to the surface: confirmation bias. Viewers often interpreted scenes based on how they already felt. The editing, the music, the juxtaposition of testimony, it all influenced perception. Was this masterful storytelling or manipulative framing? Legal experts began weighing in, picking apart the documentary's omissions. Critics argued that Making a Murderer left out key evidence. Supporters countered that the excluded material didn't justify what happened. The debate raged on. But beyond the screen, a larger conversation took root, one about systemic flaws in small-town law enforcement. The series laid bare questionable police practices, prosecutorial overreach, and potential conflicts of interest. Suddenly, the Avery case was no longer just about two men in Wisconsin. It was a mirror reflecting the cracks in America's criminal justice system. In classrooms, on talk shows, around dinner tables, the question lingered: what if it happened to me? Brendan Dassey's story, in particular, haunted viewers. A teenager with cognitive impairments, alone in an interrogation room, offering statements that seemed coerced. His words, "I'm really sorry for what I did," didn't feel like a confession, but a plea for approval. And to many, His conviction felt like a failure of the system at every level. Even as experts clashed over details, most agreed on one thing: the documentary succeeded in sparking nationwide scrutiny. It gave a voice to the voiceless. It demanded that people pay attention. And this was only part one. In the next episode, we'll dig into the investigation itself, the forensic evidence, the contradictions, the missing timelines. We'll ask the tough questions. Did law enforcement plant evidence? Was Teresa Halbach's death truly investigated without bias? Previously, we explored how making a murderer exploded into a cultural phenomenon. The outrage, the hashtags, the headlines. Viewers rallied behind Steven Avery and Brendan Dassey, convinced they'd witnessed a miscarriage of justice play out on screen. But beyond the screen, past the tweets and online petitions, there's one question that matters most. Did any of it make a difference? Could public pressure force the hand of the legal system, or was the courtroom untouched by the Netflix effect? When the final credits rolled on Making a Murderer, the legal saga was far from over. In fact, it had just entered its next phase, with a new player stepping into the spotlight. Enter Kathleen Zellner, a high-profile defense attorney with a track record of exonerating the wrongfully convicted. Zellner took on Steven Avery's case in 2016. With her signature no-nonsense approach and sharp grasp of forensic detail, she promised one thing: to prove Avery's innocence once and for all. Zellner launched an aggressive post-conviction strategy. Her filings were lengthy, detailed, and brimming with accusations. Among the claims, ineffective trial counsel, new forensic evidence, and most explosively, evidence that may have been planted. One of the key pieces? The blood evidence in Teresa Halbach's car. Zellner pointed to tests that, in her view, showed inconsistencies, possible signs of tampering. She also questioned the location of the car key, which was mysteriously discovered in Avery's bedroom after multiple previous searches came up empty. And then there was the question of bones. Zellner argued that some of Halbach's remains had been found in a burn pit elsewhere on the property, not just near Avery's trailer. That raised new questions about the crime scene and whether the evidence truly fit the state's narrative. Beyond physical evidence, Zellner also zeroed in on Avery's original trial attorneys. She alleged that their strategy was flawed, that they failed to challenge key pieces of the prosecution's case and didn't bring forward important witnesses. Through all this, Zellner wasn't just filing motions. She was tweeting updates, engaging with the public, and keeping the story alive. Legal filings became public events. Court dates drew crowds. And for every legal setback Avery faced, supporters doubled down. Still, the courts were slow to act. Motions were denied. Appeals dismissed. Despite new filings and the continued media attention, Avery remained behind bars. While Avery fought for a new trial, Brendan Dassey's situation became a lightning rod for reform. His confession, captured on video, given without a lawyer or parent present, was one of the most disturbing parts of Making a Murderer. Legal experts called it a textbook case of coercion. Dassey, just 16 at the time, had cognitive limitations and appeared eager to please his interrogators. He said what they seemed to want to hear. In 2016, a federal magistrate agreed. Dassey's conviction was overturned. The judge ruled that his confession was involuntary and unconstitutional. It was a moment of hope. For a brief time, Dassey's release seemed imminent. But Wisconsin's Attorney General appealed. The Seventh Circuit Court initially upheld the ruling, but in a rare move, the full panel later reversed it. Dassey's conviction was reinstated by a narrow vote, 4-3. The U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear the case in 2018, effectively ending his chances at federal relief. The decision stunned many. Public support surged. Legal scholars decried the ruling as a dangerous precedent. What did it mean for other juveniles facing interrogation? How could a system ignore such clear signs of vulnerability? Making a Murderer had done more than generate sympathy. It had ignited a movement. Advocates began calling for new protections for juveniles during police questioning. Several states began reviewing their procedures. In Illinois and Oregon, laws were passed banning deceptive tactics in the interrogation of minors. Dassey's case became a rallying cry, not just for his own freedom, but for a broader reckoning with how young people are treated by the justice system. His story was no longer just about guilt or innocence. It was about rights. Not everyone welcomed the scrutiny brought by making a murderer. Wisconsin prosecutors and law enforcement pushed back hard. Ken Kratz, the lead prosecutor from Avery's original trial, began a public counteroffensive. He claimed the documentary had misrepresented facts, omitted key evidence, and painted an unfair portrait of investigators. Kratz later published a book defending the prosecution's case and appeared in interviews to refute what he called Netflix fiction. Others involved in the case, including police and the judge, echoed similar concerns, that the documentary favored drama over accuracy. Legal experts weighed in, split down the middle. Some applauded the series for shedding light on a flawed system. Others warned that it presented a dangerously skewed narrative, one that could mislead the public about how trials really work. The question was clear. Can a documentary tell the whole truth? The creators of Making a Murderer, Laura Ricciardi and Moira Demos, stood by their work. They insisted their goal was not to prove guilt or innocence, but to raise questions they believed the justice system hadn't answered adequately. Still, the backlash revealed a deeper tension. Documentaries have power, but also limits. They shape perception. They can elevate voices that were once ignored, but they can also oversimplify complex legal realities. For every person convinced by the documentary, there was another who saw it as biased. The courts, for the most part, stayed firm. Motions denied. Appeals rejected. Avery and Dassey, despite the attention, remained incarcerated. And yet, the system wasn't untouched. Conversations had started. Policies were being reconsidered. People were paying attention in ways they hadn't before. The courtroom felt the ripple effects, but the biggest shift was yet to come. Be sure to like this video if you're getting value out of it, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the conclusion. Steven Avery's case is still being fought, but the impact of Making a Murderer didn't stop with him. What started as a story about one man, one family, and one trial became something so much bigger. It cracked open a world of questions about law, justice, and the power of media. But in the years since, what's changed? And more importantly, what hasn't? Today, we look beyond Avery, to the ripple effects, the reckoning, and the revolution that followed. December 2015. Making a Murderer drops on Netflix and changes everything. It wasn't just a documentary. It was a sensation. A lightning bolt across dinner tables, classrooms, and newsrooms. For many viewers, it was the first time they'd seen the cracks in the American justice system exposed so raw, so personal, and so damning. And suddenly, true crime was everywhere. We entered what many now call the golden age of true crime. Shows, podcasts, books, everyone wanted the next Making a Murderer. But along with the boom came a new kind of viewer, the armchair detective. People didn't just watch, they investigated. They paused frames, analyzed police transcripts, mapped crime scenes. And they shared theories online, often in real time. This level of public engagement with criminal cases was unprecedented. In some ways, it's powerful, people are more aware. But in others, it blurs the line between justice and entertainment. That line, between advocacy and voyeurism, has sparked fierce debate. Is it noble to spotlight injustice, or exploitative to turn tragedy into content? Critics have accused true crime creators of sensationalizing real pain, while others argue that this kind of visibility is exactly what justice needs. The answer, as always, is complicated. But Making a Murderer wasn't just a cultural moment, it was a political one. Suddenly, terms like coerced confession, Brady violation, and ineffective counsel weren't just legalese. They were headline material. One major spotlight? The way juveniles are interrogated. Public outrage over Brendan Dassey's taped interrogation helped fuel a push for reform. States like Illinois and California began requiring videotaped interrogations for juveniles and banning deceptive tactics during questioning. Brendan's story became a symbol of what can go wrong. It helped humanize the statistics we've been shouting about for years. Organizations like the Innocence Project saw spikes in donations and case submissions. Their mission, to free the wrongfully convicted and reform the system, got a renewed platform. And there was more. Calls for independent oversight of prosecutors. Demands to revisit old convictions with new technology. Even proposals to ban solitary confinement for juveniles. All from a show. But these weren't overnight changes. For every piece of progress, there's been pushback, and policy battles are still ongoing. So where is Steven Avery today? He's still in prison. Still claiming innocence. Still fighting. And leading that fight is attorney Kathleen Zellner. Zellner, known for exonerating the wrongfully convicted, took Avery's case after the show aired. Her team has filed motion after motion, requesting new DNA testing, pointing out alleged errors in trial procedure, and proposing alternate theories. Some filings were denied. Others are still pending. As for Brendan Dassey, he remains incarcerated too, despite major public outcry and support from advocacy groups, former prosecutors, and even the creators of Making a Murderer themselves. Time has passed. Media attention has faded. And for many, the story now feels old. There's a kind of fatigue. A sense of, we've heard this already. But for Avery and Dassey, the stakes never changed. The fight continues. The clock keeps ticking. They've had the power to fix this all along. But they won't. Because admitting the truth would mean admitting the system broke. Making a Murderer turned one man's case into a national conversation, but it also forced us to ask harder questions. Do we trust the justice system to correct itself? Can the court of public opinion do more harm than good? And what happens when the truth becomes just another story to consume? Whether you believe Steven Avery is guilty or innocent, his case revealed a system that often prioritizes conviction over correction. And in that, there's a lesson for all of us. Because justice isn't just about what happens in the courtroom, it's about what we demand from it. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive journey through Making a Murderer. If you followed this from part 1, we want to hear from you. Do you think justice was served? Or was it denied, on camera and in real life? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this series insightful, hit that like button and subscribe. Because this won't be the last story we uncover.